Hi there, welcome to this Java interview guide from in 28 minutes. In this series of videos, we are covering a lot of interview questions on different Java topics. As you already know, in 28 minutes is famous for all its interview question videos. We have interview question videos on lambda expressions, multi-threading, collections, exception handling, and also we have a lot of different videos on JUnits, design patterns, Eclipse, Mockito, Spring MVC and stuff. In this series of videos, we are covering interview questions on OOPS, Advanced Java, Servlets, JSPs, Design Patterns, JDBC, J2EE, Maven, and Eclipse. All the information about different questions that we would discuss is on the GitHub repository. github.com in 28 minutes. Welcome to this video where we are discussing about the interview questions on design patterns. We are on the GitHub repository in 28 minutes interview -guide. So you can find this in the link in the description as well. And we are in the section on design patterns. So over here. So if you look at this thing, like among the resources is one of the full videos on design patterns. This kinds of covers the entire things around design patterns. So if you look at this video, if I can get through the ad, as you can see, this is a very popular video on YouTube. I mean, this is the new version. The old version had almost 1 lakh views, and now this version of the video we have created recently, it's about 158 views, but 8 likes already. And as you can see, we have a lot of subscribers as well. So yeah, this video is really a popular video. If you want to understand design patterns in detail, we would look at all the design patterns in detail in this particular video. The other resource we have is a presentation. This is a presentation on the Java EE thing. So if you look at it, this is called Demystifying Java EE, where we go through all the different things. So web layer, business layer, what are the different things which are possible, MVC, view, web services. We look at it from the architecture perspective. So we look at what are the different layers, what are the different frameworks that you can use. In the business layer, we use EJP and Spring. And if you look at the typical architecture in the data layer, we use Hibernate, IBatis, JDBC and things like that. And we have the integration layer, we have JMS, MQ and web services and things like that. And also we look at the different Java EE architecture patterns. So the architecture patterns, then we have different things, which different important principles related to design, and then we have patterns which are related to each layer, like friend controller, application controller, intercepting filter, business layer, as well as integration layers. So there are a lot of things that we cover as part of this particular course. I mean, it's a huge course. It's one of our favorite courses, Java EE Design Patterns. If you are interested in that particular course, then you can actually go and find the link in here. So this is right beneath the design patterns thing. So you'd find a link, Java EE Patterns. This would be a huge discount code for you. So you can go ahead and try that. So in this video, the attempt is to cover some of the important examples around design patterns. So what we'll do is we'll cover a few examples around factory pattern, prototype pattern, singleton pattern, adapter, decorator, and things like that. So let's get started. We will use the presentation which is present in here, Java design patterns. So this is the presentation I'm going to right now. This is third link in here, Java design patterns. That's the one which I'm loading up. It's loading from GitHub, so I'm not on a fast connection network, so it's a little slow. Let's wait for it to download. Typically, one of the question which is asked around design patterns is, what are the 3 types of design patterns? Yeah, it's very simple, right? So 3 types of design patterns are creational, structural, and behavioral. Okay, before that, what are design patterns? Basically, like, I have 15 years of Java experience. There are people who have 25 years of Java experience, and there are others who have 100, like probably are working on Java from the time it was created. So basically, I mean, also there are things like object-oriented programming, right? Object-oriented programming, I mean, there is object-oriented programming even before Java. So with object-oriented programming, there are certain patterns which a few people found that they are good to follow. So in their experience, they realize that when things are done in this way, it helps problems in this specific context. So those are what are called design patterns. There are 4 people called the Gang of 4 who came up with a set of design patterns. They said, okay, given this set of context, given this context, this is the solution. In this context, this is the right solution. That's what are called patterns, and this set of patterns are called design patterns. And we have three such kind of three such categories of design patterns. Here we are restricting our discussion to just the object-oriented design patterns. There are other patterns, how you develop Java EE web application and things like that. As far as the design patterns related to object-oriented programming are concerned, there are three kinds. One is creational, that deals with how you create objects, whether you use a singleton, whether you use a prototype, whether you use a flyweight. So those are creational patterns, how you create objects. So object-oriented programming is all about objects, right? So how do you create objects? The creational patterns deal with it. How do you organize your objects? Whether there is an inheritance relationship, there is an association relationship between them. How do you structure your objects? That's your structural design patterns. They deal with the structure of your objects. How do you organize different parts? What are the member variables? How is it structured? That's your structural design patterns. And behavioral patterns are just related to the behavior of the objects, runtime behavior, how the objects interact with each other. Uh, that's basically your behavioral patterns. So when it comes to the creational patterns, the best examples are prototype pattern, builder pattern, singleton, and the factory pattern. Factory pattern is typically used when I have different kinds of objects of a similar type, and I don't really want everybody to start creating objects using new. In that kind of situations, I would use a factory to allow to provide a single static method. I'm talking about static factory method. So you provide a method which would allow you to create an object, take the inputs, create the object of the specific type you need, and return it back. So the external people will not know anything about what kind of object that you are creating. So then singleton. Singleton is one of the popular design patterns, I would say. So singleton is one object per JVM. So for that particular class, you can only create one object in one JVM. That's basically what is called a singleton. So there are multiple ways of creating singleton. One of them is using a private constructor and create a static method in there and check whether there is that instance already there. If that instance is already created, you return a reference of the existing one. And the other patterns which are important are the builder and the prototype patterns. Let's look at a few quick examples in Java for those. So factory method, the good example is the calendar.get instance. So if I want to create a calendar instance, all that I need to do is calendar.get instance. So this is a factory method. Similarly, the char set in the new IO. So that's a good example of the factory method. The prototype is basically the object.clone is the best example for prototype. So you have an object already, you create a copy of it by using the clone method. So that's your prototype design pattern. Singleton, like your runtime.get runtime or the system.get security manager. These are really good examples for your creational design patterns. Let's quickly move on to your structural design patterns. The structural design patterns are related to how you organize your objects. So a proxy, decorator, facade, adapter, flyweight, these are all called structural design patterns. Let's quickly look at some examples of the structural patterns. So the first one is adapter pattern. Adapter pattern is basically from one format to another format. So for example, here arrays.asList. So you have the arrays.asList method which converts an array, a list of items into a list. That's a good example of a adapter pattern. So you can use a list of items. You can have a set of items and you convert them into a list. That's a very good example of an adapter pattern. And also the typical unmarshal and the marshal method. So the marshalling of the thing would convert the object from XML, and the unmarshalling is the reverse. Another good example of the structural patterns is the flyweight pattern. Flyweight pattern is typically used, for example, as in a chess game. You have an initial set of pieces which you want to create for everything. So what you do is you'd have that ready and you'd kind of reuse it again and again. Similarly, a flyweight pattern is used in the integer class. So the value of method for an int, to create an int integer, it actually tries and reuses whatever values which are present. So if the value is between 1 and 28, it reuses whatever object is already present. So that's a good example of the flyweight pattern. Next, let's quickly look at a few behavioral patterns. The behavioral patterns we would want to look at are chain of responsibility, command, iterator, strategy, and template method. The chain of responsibility is basically how the exception handling works. So let's say like I'm calling method, there's method 1 which calls method 2, and method 2 calls method 3, and method 3 throws an exception. When a method 3 throws exception, if there is no try catch block in the method 3, then the exception goes to the method 2, and it checks, is there a try catch block in method 2? No, it goes to method 1. So this is basically what is called chain of responsibility, where you have a sequence of things. So just like the approval process, right? So if I'm not having the rights to approve something, I'll send it to my manager and his manager and so on. Similar to that, in exception handling, if a method cannot do exception handling, then it gives it to the calling method, to its calling method, to its calling method, and so on. So that's exception handling. Another good example of that is the servlet do filter method. So if a servlet is able to, it will process it and it will give it to the next thing which can filter it. So that's a very good example of the chain of responsibility thing. A command pattern is basically how the entire request response cycle works. So when a servlet, if there's a servlet, the servlet gets the input as a request. So all the data in the HTML page or in the form gets encapsulated, it creates translated into a form, and the browser sends that form out to the server. So this form, whichever is created, is the command object. This is an example of the command pattern. What the servlet does, it takes this command object as the input, it creates a response and returns that back. So it's a very good example of the command pattern. The other good example is creating threads using runnable interface. So implement a specific method called run, and you define this is what needs to be done. So whenever somebody calls the start method on that particular thread, Java knows that the run method needs to be called. So all the logic that you need to do is encapsulated as part of the run method. So this is a good example of the command pattern. The other thing is iterator. Iterator is commonly used to loop around collections, right? So we don't want to understand how the collections are internally. So whether it's using an array or whether it's using a linked list, I don't really want to mind about it. I want one way of looping around them. And that's what the iterator provides. It provides a way of looping around all of them. The next pattern is strategy. So basically strategy pattern is using like different algorithms. So I would want to be able to separate the algorithm out into separate things so that I can use different algorithms on the same problem. One of the ways Java implements that is by using the comparator. So when you have a collections.sort, you can pass in a comparator. So you can pass in the algorithm that you would want to use do the sorting based on as an input. So this is a good example of the strategy pattern. You can say, I want to sort these by using this logic. So the logic is outside, so you kind of separate the logic out from the sort method. What the sort method does is, given a logic, it can sort based on that. The other pattern that we want to look at is the template method pattern. So the template method pattern is typically used in all the abstract methods. So you have a lot of non-abstract methods in abstract list, abstract set, and abstract map. These all use the template method pattern. Another good example of the template method pattern is the abstract controller in Java. So kind of defines the pattern of how things has to be done, and it has a lot of abstract methods to implement the details. So that's basically example of a template method. So the idea behind this particular video is not to clearly make you an expert on design pattern, but just to give you an overview. If you really want to become an expert on design patterns, we would really recommend you to look at the full video on design patterns and just go through the entire thing and do our entire course on Java EE patterns. I think that would be a really good step for becoming an expert on the design patterns. The idea behind this was to quickly take you over all the different kinds of design patterns on the object-oriented side, kind of give you quick examples on some of them so that you can get an overview of them in about 10 minutes. So I hope we are successful in that effort. This video is part of a series of 25 videos which we have created, And all the links to those videos are present in the GitHub repository, github.com/in28minutes/interview-guide. So you can find the link in the description of the video as well, and you can watch all the other videos as well. One of the facts that we really believe at in 28 minutes is all these interview guides are useful once you are an expert at something, or once you have a little bit of experience with that. So there are a lot of courses that we have: Java EE, Patterns, Spring MVC, JSP Servlets, Maven. These are all really good courses. We also have a complete 5-hour course on Java interview questions and answers. It's almost 6 hours of videos on different things related to Java. So those are the things I think you'll find interesting after watching this video, and if you liked it, I'm sure you'll like the other courses as well. So give them a try, see if you like them. Uh, you can make the best use of this Git repository which is present in here. Good luck with all your interview preparation. Until next time, this is bye from Ranga at in 28 minutes.